Cuba's government announced it will begin reopening hotels and restaurants after almost 3 months of lockdown. The United States imposed its harshest sanctions yet against Syria on Wednesday to prevent President Bashar al-Assad from achieving a military victory. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has called for drastic action on violence against women, which has surged during the COVID-19 lockdown. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. Cuba's government announced it will begin reopening hotels and restaurants after almost 3 months of lockdown. According to the government, the process will gradually unfold in 3 phases to avoid a spike in coronavirus cases. Meanwhile, new hotels are being built in Havana and other tourist resorts, and private restaurants are using the current suspension of services to refurbish their facilities while also implementing new protocols to ensure visitors are protected from COVID-19. Social distancing, face masks, reduced occupancy and rigorous cleaning regimes will become the new normal for an expected jump in tourists once the country completely reopens.
We want people to feel safe and assured that they will be in a safe environment. That's gotten better, not only with check-in, but also with cleaning of the rooms, air purification, and the food and beverage services. So in all facets, in the things we offer, we have improved, and I see that as very positive. We are getting ready for what is coming, because we think tourists will return in August. With the way things are going, I have set up in the restaurant 1 table per room, and I will provide the clients with the service they deserve.
Bahamas Tourism Minister Dionisio de Aguilar said health regulations resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic will limit the number of people that the tourism industry can accommodate. As major resorts in Bahamas announced they won't be reopening until later in the year, the minister said that it could take at least 18 months for the tourism industry to fully rebound. He noted that many large resorts would be operating at a loss if they were to open next month. Meanwhile, the Atlantis Resort, the largest private employer in the country, is set to reopen on July 7th. However, the Meliá Nassau Beach Resort will not open until October, and Club Med on the island of San Salvador is not expected to reopen until later in the year. And also in the Bahamas, Minister of Education Jeffrey Lloyd has shut down a number of establishments that were operating without legal authority and putting young children at risk. During the last budget debate, the minister warned all operators of education services to register with the National Accreditation and Equivalency Council of the Bahamas. Lloyd said anyone who does not register with the council will be operating outside of the law, for which there are serious penalties. The minister also called on Bahamians to be very careful when choosing institutions for their children's education.
Need to come to the workplace equipped with skills that can be utilized immediately. And as far as
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro offered an update on COVID-19 figures on Wednesday, noting it was the most bitter day of the epidemic in the country. President Maduro reported 159 new locally transmitted COVID-19 cases, of which 132 occurred at Las Pulgas market in the city of Maracaibo. Meanwhile, 72 cases were imported, of which 56 were nationals returning from Colombia and 16 from Brazil. The Venezuelan president stressed that new special measures are under consideration and will be announced to protect the Venezuelan population, as new cases entering the country irregularly from Colombia and Brazil pose a threat to major Venezuelan cities. And Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro also stressed that according to a book to be published by John Bolton, US President Donald Trump intended to invade Venezuela in order to annex its territory.
Trump intended to invade Venezuela in order to convert it into United States territory. This is the breaking news today because of the release of the book by John Bolton, who is an American diplomat and ex-advisor to President Donald Trump. Bolton revealed that President Trump considered Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaidó as weak and childish in comparison with President Maduro.
Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has presented lawmaker Fabio Faria as his new communications minister, heading a ministry that was closed under the last government. A representative of the Social Democratic Party, Faria is an ally of Bolsonaro and son-in-law of billionaire television presenter Silvio Santos, who also owns Brazil's third largest TV network.
I am grateful for the confidence, for the nomination, and I hope that I will be able to contribute as a communications minister. We need respect, above all, and let us leave our political ideological differences aside to face this common invisible enemy.
And also in Brazil, one of the most iconic defenders of the Amazon rainforest has died after contracting the coronavirus. 65-year-old Indigenous chief Paulinho Paikan died of COVID-19 on Tuesday in a hospital in the city of Rendensau. The environmental leader had accused the government of Jair Bolsonaro of neglecting Indigenous communities. Paikan gained world fame on leading the fight against the construction of a hydroelectric power plant in Belo Monte in the 1980s. He also worked to build alliances around the world to save the Amazon.
Paulino Paikan is an authentic leader, a traditional leader who also knew politics. He's a victim of coronavirus, of COVID-19, and today leaves us with great memories, learning, and much nostalgia.
Panama has rolled out rapid coronavirus tests following a recent jump in daily cases. The rapid tests were purchased in Europe and China and have been tested and verified by the Gorgas Memorial Institute, the country's leading medical research centre, with results available within 48 hours. Meanwhile, health workers have visited homes in the populous community of Nuevo Tocumen, one of the most affected areas in the country, where they targeted families who have reported one of their members being sick, as well as those who have presented symptoms or have had contact with a positive case. Panama has registered over 21,000 confirmed cases and more than 400 COVID-19 fatalities.
The intention is to continue to do mass testing more and more. For example, in the last reports, there were 3 consecutive days of 600 cases or more. There was also a report of 800 cases. That is the reflection that we are doing more the tests. If they continue to abuse flexibilization, probably the third block, sectors that are reopening after lockdown measures, won't open, and even the risk of closing previous block is there. We might also close the second or even the first. Therefore, we need the population to continue collaborating and taking care of themselves so that we can do the job properly.
LATAM Airlines has suspended domestic operations in Argentina for an unknown amount of time due to the coronavirus crisis. LATAM, which is based in Chile, said it will maintain international flights. This is the first major cutback for Latin America's largest airline since it filed for bankruptcy protection last month. A LATAM spokesperson said the subsidiary will begin a government process in Argentina before it can lay off over 1,700 employees. LATAM's top rival, Colombia's Avianca, has also filed for bankruptcy protection and liquidated its subsidiary in Peru. And we have more stories coming up after this very short break, so stay with us. Harshest sanctions yet against Syria on Wednesday to prevent President Bashar al-Assad from achieving a military victory. The new travel restrictions and financial sanctions authorise a freeze on the assets of anyone dealing with Syria, regardless of nationality, and cover many more sectors. The sanctions also target those dealing with entities from Russia and Iran. The unilateral measures were imposed under an executive order and the so-called CISA Syria Civilian Protection Act. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the new steps were the start of a sustained campaign of economic and political pressure against President Assad and vowed more in the coming weeks. Russia, China and Syria have strongly condemned the move, which comes in the face of the Syrian government's advances against US-backed terrorists and at a time when the country is facing a severe economic crisis. US President Donald Trump has sued his former national security advisor, John Bolton, in an attempt to block the publication of his memoirs, which he claimed are filled with classified information. The book addresses an array of topics such as chaos in the White House, the president's inconsistency, his haphazard decision-making process, and his dealings with allies and enemies alike. Bolton's lawyer says the White House is using national security justifications as an excuse to stop him from talking, which could lead to criminal charges. Mexico, Canada and the United States announced they will maintain restrictions on movements at their borders. The measure extends the ban on crossing from one country to another through July 21st. The US-Mexico border is one of the most active in the world, as over 1 million people normally cross it every day. Officials announced on Tuesday that the US, Mexico and Canada decided to extend the restrictions on non-essential travel across their borders for 30 days. The United Nations elected 4 new non-permanent members of the Security Council this Wednesday. Special voting arrangements were made at the UN headquarters due to COVID-19 related restrictions. 7 countries were vying for the spots. The 193-member body elected India, Ireland, Mexico and Norway as the next Security Council non-permanent members for a 2-year term. UN member states also elected Turkish diplomat and politician Volkan Bozkır as president of the 75th session of the UN General Assembly.
India will become a member of the Security Council at a critical juncture, and we are confident that in the COVID and the post-COVID world, India will continue to provide leadership and a new orientation for a reformed multilateral system. Thank you.
Belgium, dozens of freelance interpreters working in EU institutions have demonstrated in front of the European Parliament over a lack of financial assistance during the COVID-19 pandemic. Protesters say after virus lockdowns were implemented, their work has all but dried up, and now with a usual summer break around the corner, many will go without 5 months of income this year. Interpreters say they feel abandoned by the EU and are angered by the lack of financial aid, while the body continues to preach solidarity. Around 1,200 freelance interpreters usually ensure simultaneous interpretations across the EU's 24 languages during conferences and events. The International Association of Conference Interpreters is negotiating with EU agencies to do better than their offer of an advance to be paid back when normal interpreting work resumes.
Solidarity, they've asked the member states to do it, they've set up a fund, but they're not practicing that solidarity that they're preaching within the institutions themselves, and that's quite problematic. And I think that a solution can be found, but for that they need to engage in proper social dialogue, they need to engage with our interpreters.
Mid-June, July's around the corner. We don't work in August anyway. That will take us through to September, and at that point that will be roughly 5 months that some of us will have had no income and all of us will have suffered from a marked drop in our income. So our patience essentially is beginning to run out, and that's why we've decided to up the game.
One of Spain's most visited monuments, the Hombro Palace, has reopened its doors after a 3-month closure due to the coronavirus. With travel regulations still in place until June 21st, only locals were able to visit the site, which is one of the world's largest open-air museums of Islamic architecture. From July 1st, borders will be open to all international visitors, although strict security measures will remain in place. This includes the mandatory use of masks, hand sanitizer, and the observance of social distancing rules.
Today we can open with all the safety guarantees. We are at 50% of our capacity for visits because we are in a phase 3, with all the measures set by health authorities to guarantee both the safety of our workers and the safety of the people who are going to visit us from now on. This is fundamental for us.
And we're taking one last very short break now. Stay with us for more. Welcome back to From the South. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has called for drastic action on violence against women, which has surged during the current COVID-19 lockdown. During Wednesday's COVID-19 update, President Ramaphosa expressed concern regarding the rise in gender-based violence. During the lockdowns imposed across the world due to the coronavirus pandemic, domestic violence has been on the rise and protests have erupted in South Africa. However, the president has appealed for calm and called on citizens to work with the government to combat violence against women and children so that the country doesn't end up fighting two wars alongside the pandemic.
At a time when the coronavirus pandemic has left us all feeling vulnerable and uncertain, violence is being unleashed on the women and children of our country with a brutality that defies any form of comprehension. By looking away, by discouraging victims from laying charges, by shaming and insulting women for their lifestyle choices or their style of dress, we become complicit in these crimes.
African leaders thanked China for its solidarity and support to combat the coronavirus pandemic this Wednesday during an extraordinary China-Africa summit chaired by the Chinese president.
The strength of the bond between Africa and China is clear. The solidarity we have seen during this difficult time has once again demonstrated the productivity of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, whose 20th anniversary we will mark later this year. The government of the People's Republic of China and the Chinese private sector provided crucial supplies of testing materials and medical equipment in Africa when it was needed most.
Sino-Africa solidarity and better multilateral cooperation is key to winning the battle against this pandemic. Through this and other platforms, let us continue to strengthen the bonds of solidarity, of cooperation and collaboration that exist amongst us, and take collective action to ensure the future of humanity.
Over 20,000 people have been evacuated after a mudslide caused by major flooding in China's Sichuan province. Local authorities say 14 people were successfully rescued, while 2 are still missing. A video filmed in Damba County shows the mud blocking a river and diverting waters which submerge streets and houses. The UN Refugee Agency has relocated over 30,000 Nigerians who fled into neighbouring Niger following a rise in attacks by militias. Niger's Maradi region has become a temporary shelter for Nigerian refugees displaced by armed groups. Despite border closures due to COVID-19 restrictions, refugees have been allowed to enter Niger and receive aid and basic healthcare. The insecurity at the border and the influx of refugees has further displaced 23,000 Nigerians in their own country.
In the border villages, the host villages, we could not ensure the protection of these people, the management of protection cases, the follow-up of children, the follow-up of women, all of the aspect of protection. It was really very difficult. Here in the villages of opportunity, it will be really very easy with all the partners who are already working on the sites.
Zimbabwean nurses at some of the country's main health facilities have downed tools, demanding a review of their salaries because of soaring inflation. The health practitioners went on a strike just a few days after their salaries were allegedly slashed by almost half, as the country continues to bear the brunt of sanctions imposed by the United States and its allies. The move comes at a time when the Zimbabwean government is striving to combat the COVID-19 pandemic, which fortunately has been spreading at a slower rate in the country than in neighbouring nations such as South Africa. And following the grievances expressed by health practitioners on their salary review, the Zimbabwean government has increased salaries for all civil servants as well as pensions, as earnings have been eroded by inflation. The Ministry of Finance on Wednesday announced that civil servants' salaries and pensioners' allowances will be adjusted upwards by 50% with immediate effect. Meanwhile, some allowances, especially for health workers and COVID-19 response, will be paid in US dollars to curb the spiralling inflation in the country. And we've come to the end of this news brief, but we finish with a clip of a video produced by members of the UN Symphony Orchestra who came together to play a virtual concert in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website as well as on social media. For Televisor English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching and enjoy the music.